Like a lot of people in this room, I don't spend much money investing in Wall Street, but we're all part of institutions that have a lot of influence, whether they're churches or public employee retirement systems. For the panelists, the question is, what are you seeing in terms of shareholder activism that brings you hope or the opposite? And what are the opportunities there? Who's effectively influencing from the inside? Thank you.
I can answer part of that, and I want to say, because I went to the Monsanto shareholder meeting and spoke in front of all of the shareholders, I learned as I did that, I just thought that was something, I was asked to do that because a shareholder activist purchased $2,500 worth of shares of Monsanto. I didn't, he did, and he asked me to speak in his proxy to present a referendum to have either somebody like a farmer or a pediatrician on their board. If they're going to feed the world, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a farmer or a pediatrician on the board, right? So I've said, of course I will speak, and I got 3 minutes and spoke. Now, there are groups like Some of Us and As You Sow that do this. This is their thing. I didn't know that they go and speak in front of the entire shareholders in their board meetings. But you should know that there's a bill that's been presented to stop us from doing that. They want to use technology to make a webinar, so then they can control who gets to speak. Because they didn't like it when I went and Mr. Grant, the CEO, was trying to be very gracious and cool, and he said that I could get up and ask questions later multiple times if you wish, right? And so I did. I got up 4 times and really held them to account. They didn't like that, so they want to be able to stop that. But I would urge you to support organizations like As You Sow and Some of Us, and is it 360? I think there's another group, 360, something like that. And nothing's stopping any of you from buying 1 share and going to speak as well. I would love it if there were hordes of us at the shareholder meetings, if we could do that, to hold them to account, and we can, And when I was there and I spoke, the proxy that I presented passed 51%, which was historical. Usually they only get 2 to 19%. And I have to tell you, there was a shareholder that stopped me in the bathroom and said, "Keep doing this. There are many of us that support you. Don't give up. There are people in there that want a change. So I want you to get that they're not all evil. They want to feed their people just like you, and they do need to change, and that's what we asked for, was them to make the changes. Maybe one of you can speak to other groups how to make changes.
One thing I would say is that in New York State, we have a very courageous Attorney General called Eric Schneiderman, who is bringing shareholder suits against Exxon for lying about the value, because most of the oil companies, this is a little bit different subject, but this is a good audience to understand this. The oil companies' value, share value, comes from the amount of oil that company owns under the ground. And if we even used 20% of the value that is claimed, the earth would simply stop supporting life. So the oil companies will never be able to use that oil, and Eric Schneiderman is suing them to get them to admit that, to devalue their company and devalue their share value, because it doesn't reflect an accurate value, because a company like Exxon is never, ever going to be able to take all that oil out of the ground that it now claims as the value of its company. So Schneiderman has brought this suit. Exxon has used its indentured servants in Washington, D.C., to bring hearings and investigations against Schneiderman. They have had AGs in the different states who are Republican go after Schneiderman, and they've sued Schneiderman in court. Schneiderman originally had commitments from a number of other AGs to join him, but the only one that has joined him right now is the Massachusetts AG. And originally, Xavier Becerra said that he was going to, of course, join that lawsuit. but he's gone silent on it. And it would be great for him to hear from people in this room that they want him to stand up to the oil industry. Because he's supposed to be, he represents himself as somebody who is willing to stand up to the industry. And if he won't stand up to Exxon, he won't stand up to Monsanto, and he won't stand up to Dow, and he won't stand up to DuPont. He's just going to be another sock puppet for the industry. So it's time for him to get a spine, and we should work together on installing one in him.
Last October, many organizations of the world that have been fighting Monsanto, their GMOs, their Roundup, got together to organize a Monsanto tribunal in The Hague, as well as a People's Assembly, which would have wider participation. And because Bayer and Monsanto are merging, when the assembly of the shareholders meeting of Bayer was taking place, we organized an assembly there, and it's very interesting. At every level, the panic is growing in this cartel. The more concentrated they're becoming, the more scared of civic freedoms and democracy they're becoming. So Bayer tried to go to court to have the protests as well as the shareholder presence within declared as terrorist act in German courts. Of course, it didn't hold. And as a result of their stupidity, the group of protesters and the group of people who gave evidence inside, there's a group called Bayer Coordination that has been watching the crimes of Bayer separately. The press covered the protests better than they've ever covered. And I think we need to recognize that this cartel, both because the only product that they have is poisons, the only method they have of dealing with governance and marketing is toxic, that we can put them on the defensive by sticking to our truth and our solidarity and knowing that they will try and criminalize seed saving, they will try and criminalize our civic actions, they will try and criminalize every freedom that is our freedom for being part of the earth and is our freedom in every constitution. That is the defense of our freedoms that we must not give up on, and those who are more privileged than the others have a bigger obligation. That's why we also must not forget Bhopal, because it was the genocide of our times. It is a liability that has not been fulfilled, and the concentration of Dow and DuPont and the purchase of Union Carbide by Dow means Dow and DuPont are liable for that crime. And I think we should, like we did the Monsanto Tribunal, I think we should think in terms of 2 years to really take the collective crimes of not just Monsanto, but the poison cartel, and do something creative with it like we did in The Hague.